Welcome to Mastering Life's Adventures, an educational podcast about tapping into your true self, the soul, the substance of your life, to discover what life's ups and downs are really about, and how to have a greater sense of purpose, peace, joy, and fulfillment. I am Dr. Judith Holder, your host, coach, psychologist, fellow seeker who enjoys diving into the connections between spirituality, psychology, wellness, and your everyday life's adventures. All preparing and polishing you like the facets of a magnificent diamond to be your best self. If you're craving more from your life, you are in the right place. Come, let's journey together and transforming what you know into who you really are. Mastering Life's Adventures begins now.
Hi, I'm back. I'm here to talk about the next key. I want to share with you traps of the mind. Because as I was talking about the previous episode about creating boundaries for love, but there's also the mind creates some boundaries that hinder our soul's progress. And we don't think about it, but the things I'm going to talk about, these are traps. And they're limiting beliefs, limiting our actions and our way of seeing and knowing and being in the world. And we don't realize, because they're so unconscious sometimes, these traps. There's going to be 5 of them that I'm going to talk about and how it relates and impacts the soul. So let's begin. One of the traps, well, maybe let's begin with first talking about how the mind is really very powerful. It's incredibly capable of being able to give us the creativity, the logic we need, problem solve. So there are good things that the mind does for us. It serves as a vehicle for us for greater expression and be able to think things through and be able to look at things in a rational way, or being able to look at a situation and say, how does that tie into why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling right now? There's a lot of benefit the mind has given us. When I talk about traps of the mind, these are patterns of thought that limit your potential growth. These traps can distort your perceptions or prevent you from accessing your higher wisdom, your soul's direction. So these do have words to them, these traps, and they're more psychological distortions that are at play. Each one of them that I'm going to be talking about in the 5 of them. But I'm looking at it through the perspective of what impact it has on our soul's evolution, our soul's growth, and feeling a greater sense of wholeness, completeness, and aliveness. These traps of the mind, if left unchecked, can lead to confusion, fear, or feeling we can't be our true self because we're trapped into these different types of distortions of the mind and thinking that's the reality, and it actually isn't. So when we can identify these particular traps and its impact upon the soul, then we're more conscious to make choices, change things, and start to catch when these distortions are coming up, making us believe certain things that may not be true. The first one is confirmation bias. This happens when a person seeks to out information that confirms a pre-existing belief, their pre-existing views about things. So they end up disregarding anything that challenges that particular preconceived notion or a belief that they have. And what happens is it creates a narrow view of reality where the person is kind of filtering things in a very biased way. And we're not aware that we do these things sometimes because our family did it. Our family distorted things in a particular way, and so we learn to do the same thing. But we hear other people's different perspectives. Instead of being curious, we may say, no, that's not right. That's not how my family thinks or how I think. And what impact that it has on the soul is that having this type of distortion of the confirmation bias can actually get us disconnected from what our soul is trying to learn and grow from, the experiences. And it can keep us trapped in a way that's not going to be healthy for us. And the soul wants expansion, to grow. and learn. We have to ask ourselves, is this true? Is this just one way of looking at it? What are other ways that I can look at it? So that's one, confirmation bias. The next one I want to talk about is catastrophizing. A lot of people can get in a small way and a larger way of catastrophizing about things that are possibly are going to happen, and we're thinking about what's going to be the worst of the worst. How do we prepare ourselves because this thing may happen, that our situation may take place? However, there's no clear evidence that that situation is going to take place, or you're not going to do well on that exam or project at work, or you're not going to be successful in your relationships. When we catastrophize, it creates a greater sense of anxiety and fear. And where there is anxiety and fear, it really disconnects us from the wisdom of our soul and inner self. Fear and anxiety, it cannot occupy in the same space where there's peace and harmony and where there's calmness. So what we're wanting to do is saying when I'm feeling anxious or I'm finding my mind moving towards catastrophizing, then that's my warning sign. It's like I can feel it in my body, my heart starts to race, my stomach starts to get upset, I start to clench my jaw when I'm feeling this anxiety and I'm thinking something bad is going to happen. But we have to challenge it. You're going to see with these particular types of traps of the mind that happen for you or other individuals, we're going to see the same qualities or steps of the how-to I'm talking will apply. Even the catastrophizing, you have to ask, is it true? Why am I thinking this way? Why am I getting anxious? I'm being overly prepared. Yes, there are some situations you want to be prepared for, but you don't necessarily have to be rigidly prepared, overly prepared for the situation that's happening. And you can lock in to the wisdom of your soul. And what do I need to do that's going to be the best next step in this situation, and do that in a calm, centered way. Otherwise, if we're too much catastrophizing taking place, then we get into this vortex of irrational fear. Yes, this vortex, the whirling around in us, swirling around, is this fear and uncertainty and doubt. It's not helping you. It actually creates greater clouding of what needs to happen. It creates a cloud for the soul to give you the information, and your intuition that you can tap into is clouded. It's like static. It's like white noise that's taking place that is not serving you nor allowing you to be connected to your I am presence, the Christ self, the Atman, the essential components of who you are, your soul self, your real self, your true self. When this is happening, you really do want to think about, is this a better way, more helpful way to look at the situation? Sometimes we have transgenerational patterns passed down from generation to generation to generation, and one of those patterns may have been catastrophizing. Everything is going to go wrong, so you prepare for the worst of the worst. But someone has to break that cycle. If you're always in that zone of anxiety, you can't be connected to your soul. You can't be connected to your spiritual nature. And that's ultimately what we're moving towards in all these experiences that we're having in life, is have that greater connection to something greater than ourselves. What would Christ do in this situation? You can also ask that as well. Let's move down the road a little bit further. And then the third one I want to talk about is the quality of anchoring effect. This happens when you have your first impression of something or someone, and that impression influences all other subsequent judgments that you have. For example, an initial negative experience can shape your viewpoint about something. So you're at work and you're talking to your boss, and this is the first time you're talking to your boss, and your boss makes a negative or snide or sarcastic comment about you. Now it colors your view about your boss. You think he's a jerk, or you think he's just egotistical, or you put all these labels to the person. And we have to realize the fact is that maybe the person didn't say it right. Maybe they didn't see it well. But because of negativity and the comment that was made to you, and that sometimes that comment has moved you into ruminating about this boss doesn't like me, they're not going to appreciate anything I say or I do, or they're going to think me stupid or whatever else, then that anchoring aspect now creates confusion about how you need, and also moves you into anxiety too, about how you need to have these one-on-one meetings with your boss. And we sometimes need to challenge ourselves and say to the confidant, this is what happened. What do you think? Is there something I can do to change the situation? Consult with friends. They may say, he had a bad day. She had a bad day. Maybe they were stressed and they were new to you and you were new to them. They were trying to make a joke, but it came out sarcastically. What helps to free up the soul is to ask your soul, what do I need to do here? Go back into that meeting fresh and be able to just have a conversation with that boss. And try to not allow that past anchoring experience that you had and not bring it into your current conversation. When we can be able to move forward and give grace to individuals, then it also allows our soul to be more connected to us. It allows our soul to explore, and that's what you're doing with the boss. When you have a one-on-one, you should find a little bit more about him or her, and you're trying to let them know a little bit more about you, so that you are now moving from a different avenue, a different level of interaction, and not being anchored from the past experience, which is creating difficulties for you to feel as if you can move forward with this particular boss without being annoyed, frustrated, or angry about something they say or do in the future. When we can release that pattern of anchoring, then it does free the soul. And it allows us to be able to look deeper into insights about how this pattern shows up. When I do that readily with other situations that people I didn't have a good relationship with, it's like I don't need anchoring. I can look at the situation as it is, take the kernels from that experience, and move on. So the next one I want to talk about is overgeneralization. And overgeneralization happens when we take one specific event or experience and apply it too broadly to all similar situations. And some of that is because the brain wants similarity, so it wants to clump things together. I understand that. But if we're doing it, for example, like we had a failure or a setback, we believe we are a failure. We didn't do that project very well, or we didn't communicate in an effective way. We think we're a bad communicator, or that we're not going to do well on that particular subject matter because we got negative feedback the first time. Or we may have a small disagreement and believe the relationship is doomed. It's doomed. We're not going to be. So we start to avoid the person. We have to realize this may be overgeneralization. Because we don't have a good meeting with someone doesn't mean it's doomed. Or because we had a setback with a project doesn't mean future projects we're going to fail. We have to be really aware. This overgeneralization mind trap doesn't put us into the pattern of always judging ourselves and preventing us from seeing the fluidness and the potential in every situation, every moment that we find ourselves in. So that we're not locked into just saying, okay, I'm going to believe all this is true for every type of person or behavior. People make mistakes. They may have blind spots that are taking place. And what you're wanting to do is say, am I overgeneralizing here? Just because it happened here, why am I feeling anxious because it's going to happen over here? What can I do instead? And one of the things you can do instead is take a moment and pray for guidance. Say, help to transmute this fear or uncertainty about this person. Let me see things clearly in my future interactions and not be swayed by the past. I'll learn from the past, but not be swayed to the point that it creates these, what we're talking about today, mind traps. Traps of the mind that doesn't serve us in any way, and it doesn't serve the soul. It keeps the soul disconnected from the perspective that there are other possibilities of looking at the situation. There's maybe questions that I need to ask to see things from a different direction. So the last one I want to talk about, so we talked about the confirmation bias, we talked about the catastrophizing and the anchoring effect and the overgeneralization. And so the fifth one is something called availability heuristic. And what that is that we make judgments based upon information that is most readily available to us, right in front of our eyes. It may be on the surface level. As for example, you may see something in the media, and that exposure to the media at that surface level, but you didn't look deeper to see the truth of it or another way of perspective about the situation. You're taking it as real and true. An example, you hear about a plane crash and all people died. You may now develop an irrational fear of flying. You took the surface issue of flying and of crash, and now you can have the fear of, well, I'm not going to fly. I'm just not going to fly, because it may happen to me. But the really likelihood of that happening to you is very small. Even though it's fear-inducing to hear about the loss of life, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen to you. What happens is with the availability of the heuristic information we have, it gets distorted, and our perceptions of reality get distorted. It fuels unnecessary fears. We're getting fearful over things that we may not need to be fearful of. For, as I said earlier, for flying, it's pretty safe in the air, and they're trying to make it even safer. And the amount of plane crashes is very small. And what we have to do in order to not move into this particular type of mind trap is to look at things past the surface. Go a little bit deeper in terms of that impression that was made and ask more questions, get more data, see the percentage of plane crashes have gone on in the past year or past decade. What airlines have they happened on? And you may find that, okay, I'm noticing that it is very, very small. Some planes have on them that I want to make sure I'm on. Okay, that's fine. But it doesn't preclude you from flying or developing a fear of flying. Because what you're trying to do in gathering more information, the data, is make sure you have access to broader truths. And that's what the soul wants. It's like, I want to know, don't lock me in these mind traps. But let's look at what is true. Another way of seeing something. Let us be attuned to the fact of, how did I slip into that particular trap of the mind? We're talking about right now 5 of them, but there's certainly so many more that you can probably think of. Observe yourself, see your way of thinking. What way does it tend to go, and how does it help you or hinder you? And the path towards helping to decrease these particular traps of the mind is through an understanding that the soul is here to help us. That between the heart and the soul coming together, that it allows us now to step up higher and look at our mind from a different perspective and not buy into everything that our mind is trying to tell us through these mind traps. I can think of it as the heart represents the love and compassion that we show towards ourselves and we show towards others as we're thinking things through. And the soul is the source of our wisdom through the Christ self, through our higher I am presence, the creator, the God source. So when we combine mind, heart, and soul, we move a little bit higher in awareness. move more in clarity we gain from the heart and the soul, and looking at things beyond the biases, beyond the fears, beyond the judgments which these mind traps set for us, and connect with our soul source, our inner self, and that we can navigate the challenges, or we understand how to take go right or left fork in the road, because we're listening to our inner self, our inner nature, and we're willing to be able to refine ourselves, to be able to say, okay, I went this way, it wasn't right direction. Okay, I see that. Now I know better direction to move in for the future. That's fine, because we tapped into our soul, we tapped into our heart, which is being more compassionate with ourselves. Once the act, which is the heart, the act of love and compassion. The soul is the clarity and the wisdom. We're uniting the soul and heart to have this wisdom with compassion. To understand we can move past our fears and anxieties, be it catastrophizing or overgeneralizing. We can move past that and heal the emotional challenges that we have in our life, the wounds or whatever, through understanding the path of the soul. Our heart is here to help us. It's the chamber of our heart that gives us to more dimensions and understanding of ourselves if we're willing to cultivate that compassion and love and care for ourselves as well as for other individuals. Now, with that being said, these mind traps are actually judgments. They're judgments that we're trying to move past. The mind doesn't have to make judgments around catastrophizing or overgeneralizing or the availability heuristic that I talked about or the anchoring. All these, including confirmation bias, are all mind traps that hinder our capacity of our soul to continue to grow. They're little boundaries that we're putting up in how we think, and therefore has an impact on how we perceive and how we act. And what we're wanting to do is be more intentional and conscious about when these types of mind traps are rearing their heads, and then what we want to do about these traps, these mental traps. And one of the things I usually say that you can do is take a step back, pause, observe yourself, breathe. In the process of breathing, you're catching this more, seeing how it's coming out, these distortions that hinder me from having clarity, wisdom to know what I want to do or how I need to do it, because we never went down that road of thinking about maybe I can do this in a different way. Maybe I can think in a different way. When we do that, stepping back and pausing and breathing and reconnecting with our heart and soul, just in those moments of just being fully centered in the now, we move towards a different path of growth through grace, purpose, and greater peace in our inner self, which opens us up to be always having that attunement to how to continue to grow in the lessons that are put before us. And one of the things I'm going to do in the next episode is do a meditation, just to be more attuned to our soul and more aware that our soul is here to learn and grow, and therefore we've got to create space in our mind and in our being for us to be in listening grace. I'm gonna do something around that in the next episode. Think about these mental distortions and traps that create us to get into a stuck viewpoint about things that are not in the service of our soul and our continued progress. Something to think about. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining me for this episode on Mastering Life's Adventures, being your best self through soul evolution. If you have enjoyed what you've heard today, I would be delighted if you would share this episode with others, leave a thumbs up, and subscribe to my Mastering Life's Adventures podcast. Look forward to your joining the next episode. Please leave any comments or suggestions you might have below. Bye for now.